Mr. Chairman, distinguished platform associates, fellow Americans, "3 years ago, the Supreme Court of this nation rendered in simple, eloquent, and unequivocal language a decision which will long be stenciled on the mental sheets of succeeding generations. For all men of goodwill, this May 17th decision came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of human captivity. It came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of disinherited people throughout the world who had dared only to dream of freedom. Unfortunately, this noble and sublime decision has not gone without opposition. This opposition has often risen to ominous proportions. Many states have risen up in open defiance. The legislative halls of the South ring loud with such words as interposition and nullification. But even more, all types of conniving methods are still being used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. The denial of this sacred right is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic tradition. So our most urgent request to the President of the United States and every member of Congress is to give us the right to vote. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer have to worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer plead to the federal government for passage of an anti-lynching law. We will, by the power of our vote, write the law on the statute books of the South and bring an end to the dastardly acts of the hooded perpetrators of violence. Give us the ballot, and we will transform the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs into the calculated good deeds of orderly citizens. Give us the ballot.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and that video clip that you saw at the opening of this show was a speech made by Martin Luther King way back in 1957, May of 1957, and he was talking about the necessity of voting. And based on what happened in the previous week, this is now October 29th when I'm doing this show, a Monday after last week's massive terrorism activities. We just had multiple bombing campaign by a Trump follower, and believing in the policies of Trump and the nationalistic views of the Republican Party, who's led by the current person who occupies the office of President of the United States. It targeted many of people who criticized the Trump administration, which is a serious, let's say, left turn from the dialogue that has been part of the American discourse. People don't realize that the way this system was established back in 1789 with the ratification of the Constitution, which was the structure of how this political process would work, how this government would work. This system, according to the second president of the United States in his writing, John Adams, he said that this was an experiment that actually put the power in the people. And the way this system was supposed to work in the discourse, in the dissent, in the way people would run this government would be by means of perpetual debate. Now, this system was a way of, let's just say, there's an old saying that I always use a number of times throughout my 20-something years here on the show, where I quote what politics is. It is said that politics is war without bloodshed, and war is nothing more than politics with bloodshed. In other words, when you have a war going on, people's passions get caught up in what's going on in their field of the theater of operations. Say, as an ex-veteran of the military, we are trained for conflict against one army against the other. We understand that there is a mission to have our point of view, our way of life, defended or projected out into the world. And politics is the same thing, but the armies are all the different interest groups. And the way that you express the conflict is through debate. And for people who don't understand, for the last 242 years, since 1789 or 1776, the way the process is through perpetual debate. You debate your interests, and you channel that oppositional energy through a structure called the political system. It has the same results a lot of times as a shooting war, a hot war. You have devastation. Look at the policies that happened that caused the collapse of the financial institutions in 2007 and 2008, or the real estate debacle. These were political decisions that were made, perpetuating by getting us into wars, the Afghanistan war and the war in Iraq, by political debate. And those who won the debate got us into those wars. And the result is all the problems we have today. If you look at what's going on, going back to NAFTA under Clinton, well, when these trade agreements were done, it was done because of political policies, which were supported or fought against through debate. That's the political process, just like any war, okay? And if you don't understand that process, but it had a devastating effect to a lot of the home factories, because it allowed a lot of companies to send their work to places like Mexico where the labor is cheap, or overseas to other countries where the labor is cheap. Trade wars. So there is a give and take, and look at the devastation that people are still reeling from in these small towns in the Midwest. They gave it a term since the last 20-something years, since NAFTA got into play. They call the Rust Belt, because the buildings look like they went through a battle. They're abandoned. You got towns that are abandoned and those type of things. No different than a shooting war. The only difference is the results of the political war the devastation comes down the road. We might not see the result of it for a few years, not understanding that in the moment that it's happening, we citizens should be up on and informed of what kind of decisions they're making, because we might not see the result immediately, like a shell dropping on a building in a shooting war, but we will still see a devastated city or town economically, socially, or even educationally, based on the decisions that are disputed in the field of battle, which is the political structure, whether it's in the federal, in Congress, or in the state level, the state legislature, or the city level, city council. It's still fought and strategized as a war. And we citizen soldiers, who are very important in this war, just like any soldiers who follow a general or who go do battle under some kind of banner, whether it's Republican, independent, or Democratic, or what other type of political organization you might be associated with. You do fight these wars, and these wars are fought through debate and also with the weapon of choice, which is the vote. So if you don't think that who you vote into office, who represents you, and who fights those wars are important, and if you see, just pulling a lever is part of the battle, but also being vigilant, just like any military. Like I said, I was 24 years in the military, but between wars, we still kept vigilant. You must keep an eye on what those people who you send to Washington do. And you've got to make sure that you come out and vote. I got some quotes I want to put up on screen to reinforce what was said many years ago that's just as important to then, just like that video showed what was important to the people that look like me, but other Americans in 1957 in that clip, is just as appropriate right now in October of 2018, 61 years later. We have an election coming up this November, all right? And the decisions that were made in 2016, where we are seeing the results of that battle of 2016, and it's not looking good for the American system based on who we allowed to go and get voted into office. The first thing on the screen you should see, it says that every American citizen must have an equal right to vote. That's important. There is no reason which can excuse the denial of that right. There is no duty which weighs more heavily on us than the duty we have to ensure that right. It is wrong, deadly wrong, to deny any of our fellow Americans the right to vote in this country. There is no issue of states' rights or national rights. There is only the struggle for human rights. And this was said back in the 60s by President Lyndon Johnson, okay? That's what a president say to the American people, because he is the top person on the political structure. He's the commander-in-chief, the overall, just like Eisenhower was the supreme commander of European troops in the 1940s. So is the President of the United States the supreme commander, not only our military, but of we citizen soldiers. And he must also give us a direction, who we have in office right now. And the Republicans who support his policies right now are not, is the people that we must make sure we get out and remove from office, or put in people that can control what is being done to this system as we speak. The next statement I'd like to read is that a democracy is a method of realizing the broadest measures of justice to all human beings. Only by putting power in the hands of each inhabitant can we hope to appropriate in the ultimate use of that power the greatest good to the greatest number, W.E.B. Du Bois. And what he was trying to say is the only way we can, is only something like 430-something congressmen and 100 senators. But who's in power? The party that's in power currently is the Republican Party. But it's also 330 million of us, American citizens. There are 40-something% who support the Republican agenda, but there is many more of us who do not. And just like Du Bois said, that weapon, okay, putting power in the hands of each of us, that's what the vote does. Those who did not vote in the 2016 election say, well, what is my one vote worth? But if millions of people say the same thing, it is worth millions of votes. And the only way this system works is that each of us go to the polls and vote, informed voting, okay? That's a patriotic way of doing it. There's a difference between a patriot and what we have in office now, admitted nationalists. Germans, Nazis were nationalists. Alt-right type of neo-Nazis are nationalists. What that means is you only believe right or wrong in your nation, or what you perceive as your nation, okay? You cannot, nothing else. Whatever the nation does, right or wrong, you follow blindly. A patriot, on the other hand, is the one who loves that same nation, but is willing to rebuke that nation when it does wrong. That's the difference. So those who call themselves patriots but functions nationalists with nationalist tendencies or authoritarian tendencies, that is what we have right now as we speak. We are having a leader, a person who holds the highest office, who is using that office to spread nationalistic perspective, views. I'm not making that up. He said it in a speech about a week or two ago. And we have people who are hearing that voice, whether they're mentally disabled or not, but are carrying out these terrorist acts that happen, like we are dealing with, that happened the past week with that bombing campaign, a Trump supporter. Like there was another two grandparents, two separate people, but they were shot at a Walmart in Louisville, Kentucky, I think it was, last week, that same week. And he shot them because they were just black. He first went to a church, and because the church happened to be locked, or we would have had the same thing that we ended up happening again by a third person who believed in that nationalistic, alt-right, neo-Nazi perspective of that is being pushed by this current administration. All right, we have those people in the position of power, and we have to put a check on that. And the only way you could do that is by putting people in place this coming November to make sure that they become a bulwark to the rampant and make sure that Congress does what it's supposed to do as the equal and leader of this country. But Congress has not been doing, because they're under the Republican view, and I can't help but sound biased, but I'm just going by the fact. If I like the policies that they have that benefit people of African descent and all Americans, hey, the Republicans started out helping people that look like me. That's what they came into being in the 1850s. But something happened in the mid-60s under the second Reconstruction, which I call the first Reconstruction happened after the Civil War. It lasted for about 12 years before it was dismantled. And then we had to wait almost another 100 years until the 1950s and 60s to fight and get the civil rights, even though we had the 13th Amendment, which freed us, the 14th Amendment, which made us citizens, okay, and the 15th Amendment that gave us vote. Okay, other groups, the dominant group, didn't have to have an amendment to give them the right to vote that made them free to do what they wanted to do. But people of African descent happened. But also, 14th Amendment has been used by women groups for their equal opportunity. The 1964 Civil Rights Bill put in a last-minute word, gender, which gave them the same, using the 14th Amendment that was made for people that look like me, a lot of people. And people don't realize that when the Supreme Court said that businesses were be treated like people too and had certain inalienable rights like people, they used the 14th Amendment, manipulated the 14th Amendment to do that. So you got to understand politics, the war, we've had a perpetual war to advance people's rights for the last 242 years. It's called an experiment because there was nothing like it when it came into being, and we're still trying to figure it out. You know, people are still trying to figure out how to use the 14th Amendment, but somebody's going to use the political system if you don't. This is what happened in 2016. Those who did not vote are just as, to me, guilty of what's going on today, because by their non-vote, because you got to understand, this person became president with less than 60 or 70,000 votes. That's the equivalent of the votes of 3 districts, 3 large districts. So that's how close we came from. I know people didn't care for Hillary Clinton, but it was not about personality. It was always about the policies that she was going to put forth that nobody wanted to listen to. Policies that would have benefit healthcare more, that would have stopped this tax thing that was passed in 2017. Everything that came out of this current administration would not have been unless we had somebody else. You know, those who are in the minority, which is the Democrats, have no power because they have no chairmen in charge of the committees. They had no control, but that can switch around if you vote based on the facts, based on 2 years of your experience under this authoritarian regime, because that's what it is. It has nothing to do with democracy. We haven't been living under a democratic system for the last almost 2 years. What we've been living under was a kleptocracy, which is a system where you have people go into power and use their positions in that power for their own personal wealth. This person who called himself president did not divest themselves from his the thing that he benefit monetarily from his companies. So he still gets profit from the decisions he made at the highest level. We had certain cabinet members who were abusing their power. That's a kleptocracy. That's not a democratic system, okay? Or an oligarchy, which is a system run by certain families, the Trumps. They're doing things around the world based on the position they now have. That has nothing to do with democracy. So if you call what you've been experiencing, and the fact that, thirdly, the fact that we are pushing away from those allies that helped this country grow since the end of World War II, all our allies we've come to. This nationalist from between the borders of the Atlantic to the borders of the Pacific, you know, from the borders of Mexico to the borders of Canada. If we just isolate ourselves, in which this administration is pushing that nationalist agenda, that is not the definition of a superpower. A superpower transcends many borders. Its interest transcends many borders. And if the interest of the United States is shrunk, that is not, we're no longer going to be a superpower, where our philosophies and the mission statements of America. The mission statement was written by, I admit, a slave owner, but I go by the words of that document called the Declaration of Independence. okay? That is our mission statement, if you read those words, that all men are created equal. And we spread that mission statement throughout the world under the umbrella of being a superpower. Under this administration, excuse me, that philosophy is being taken back. And there's a big world out there. And the more people that we turn against us, that thing is never, that mission statement is just a bunch of words. And then we'll turn on ourselves if that is not understood. And one last statement that I want people to understand that I put up on the, it's just a simple statement. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. People in 2016, November of 2016, those who did not vote taught just like that. And look at the results. Look at the results of this country and how it devolved, not evolved, devolved from a leader in spreading the word of civil rights, political rights, you know, the right of the newspapers to speak truth to power. That's how a democratic system is supposed to work. I'm not saying the system was perfect in the last 42 years. Again, the politics is a war. And if you're not vigilant, if the citizen soldiers, especially people of African descent, because knowing our history and being able to articulate our struggle in this system gives people in the now who say negative things about us, we can contradict and show that we earn our right to be citizens from 1865 to this day. But if you don't understand that history, and you don't understand the struggles of our ancestors to get the right to vote, this is the only thing we got. It was Winston Churchill who said that democracy is a bad system. But compared to all the other systems that we have throughout the world, it is the best thing going. So if you don't want to participate in this system, but yet you expect to be treated, you know, a certain way based on the mission statement of being free, it doesn't work like that until you participate in it. You take your weapon of choice, the vote, and you take it down to your voting area and you choose who you want to represent you, but you also keep vigilance on them. That's the key. You just don't vote, push a lever, and then go to sleep for 2 years, you know, or 6 years if you're a senator, or 4 years if they're the president. You make sure that you keep vigilant and you constantly move and you constantly let them know we the people. Again, this system was an experiment. The first experiment to put we the people in charge. And the weapons that they gave us to be in charge is the vote. And if you don't use that weapon, then the army that battle around you will get their point of view across. And if you don't complain about the system you're gonna get. I'll continue this discussion on the next show. So until then, peace. Hotep, bye-bye, and vote.